Maria Rodriguez sat on the transport ship and watched Earth grow larger through the small window. 5 years had passed since she last saw her home planet. 5 years of fighting in space, commanding the UES Guardian against alien enemies called HFY. The war was over now, and humanity had won. But Maria did not feel like a winner. The ship landed at Luna Station, and Maria walked down the ramp with her single bag. Other passengers rushed past her, excited to see their families. Maria had no family waiting. Her parents had died in a hover car accident 3 years ago. She had received the news during the Battle of Proxima Station, right before she had to make the hardest decision of her life. The shuttle to Earth was crowded and noisy. Children laughed and played games. Their parents talked about normal things, like jobs and shopping and weekend plans. Maria pressed herself against the window and tried not to listen. These people had no idea what war was really like. They had lived safe lives while she and her crew fought to protect them. Maria's new apartment was small and quiet, too quiet. For 5 years, she had lived with the constant hum of ship engines and the chatter of her crew. Now she could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. She unpacked her few belongings and tried to sleep, but every small sound made her jump. A neighbor's door closing sounded like a plasma blast. A car engine reminded her of enemy ships. The next morning, Maria reported to the Luna Defense Academy. She wore her dress uniform with all her medals. The Stellar Cross shined on her chest, the highest honor a space officer could receive. She had earned it during the siege of Proxima Station, when she used gravity wells to trap enemy ships and save 3 colony worlds. Colonel Frank Morrison met her at the main entrance. He was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes. Maria had read his file. He had spent the entire war behind a desk, pushing papers and making reports. He had never seen real combat. "Captain Rodriguez," Morrison said with a fake smile, "welcome to the Academy. I trust you'll find our methods here quite different from your frontier experiences." Maria noticed how he said frontier experiences like they were something shameful. She kept her face calm and professional. "I look forward to sharing what I've learned, sir." Morrison led her through clean hallways filled with young cadets. Everything was perfect and organized. Too perfect. Maria was used to ships that showed battle damage, crews that worked with whatever they had. This place felt like a museum. "Your office is down here," Morrison said, opening a door to a small room with no windows. "We've assigned you to teach basic navigation to first-year students. Nothing too complicated. We wouldn't want to overwhelm them with war stories." Maria looked around the tiny office. It was smaller than her quarters on the Guardian. The walls were bare, except for a standard academy poster about duty and honor. Her medals and commendations meant nothing here. On her first day of teaching, Maria faced a classroom of 18-year-old cadets. They looked so young and eager. She remembered being that age, full of dreams about serving humanity among the stars. These kids had no idea what space combat was really like. "Today we'll learn about navigation during combat conditions," Maria began. "When enemy ships are shooting at you, your computers might fail. You need to know how to plot a course using only star positions and basic math." A cadet raised his hand. "Ma'am, why would we need that? Our ships have backup computers and AI." "Systems," Maria paused. How could she explain that she had watched those same systems fail when plasma fire melted through hull plating? How could she tell them about the time she had to navigate by dead reckoning while her ship burned around her? "Because systems fail," she said simply. "And when they do, you need to be ready." After class, Maria walked to the faculty lounge. Other instructors sat around a table, drinking coffee and talking. They looked up when she entered, and their conversation stopped. "Well, if it isn't our war hero," said Commander Lissa Hayes. She was young, maybe 30, with perfect hair and a spotless uniform. "How was your first day playing teacher?" Maria poured herself coffee and sat down. "It went well. The students are eager to learn. I heard you're teaching them to navigate like it's still the Dark Ages," Hayes continued. "Manual calculations and star charts. Really, Maria, this is the 25th century. We have computers for that." "Computers can be destroyed," Maria said quietly. "I've seen it happen." Hayes laughed. "Oh, more war stories. How exciting. Tell me, do you still check under your bed for Kethver boogeymen?" The other instructors chuckled. Maria felt her face grow hot, but she kept her voice steady. "The Kethver are still out there. The war may be over, but they haven't forgotten how to fight." "The war is over," Hayes said firmly. "We won. It's time to move on and focus on the future, not cling to the past." Maria finished her coffee and left without another word. As she walked back to her office, she heard Hayes talking to the others. "She's clearly having trouble adjusting. All that combat has affected her mind. We need to be patient with these damaged veterans." Maria stopped outside her office door. Damaged? They thought she was damaged. Maybe she was. She had nightmares about her crew members who had died under her command. She jumped at sudden noises. She couldn't sleep in complete silence. But she had also saved thousands of lives and helped win a war. That evening, Maria sat in her apartment, staring at the wall. She had fought alien enemies across the galaxy. She had made impossible decisions and lived with the consequences. She had earned the respect of her crew and the fear of her enemies. Now she was fighting a different kind of war. The enemies wore friendly faces and used words instead of weapons. They smiled while they stabbed her in the back. They called her damaged while they sat safely in their perfect little world. Maria opened her desk drawer and looked at the service pistol inside. The weight of it would be familiar in her hand. It would be so easy to make all the pain stop. So many of her fellow veterans had chosen that path. The statistics were not something the Academy liked to talk about. A soft knock at her door interrupted her dark thoughts. Maria closed the drawer and answered the door. Cadet Ryan Murphy stood in the hallway, looking nervous. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you at home. I just wanted to say thank you for today's lesson. The way you explained stellar navigation using real combat examples, it all made sense for the first time." Maria looked at the young man's earnest face. He reminded her of her first navigator on the Guardian, a kid named Pete who had died during their second battle. Pete had asked the same kinds of questions, had the same eager desire to learn. "You're welcome, Murphy. Study hard. The skills you learn here might save your life someday." After Murphy left, Maria sat back down at her desk. She didn't open the drawer again. Instead, she pulled out her lesson plans and started working on tomorrow's class. She thought about Pete and all the other young officers who had died because they weren't properly trained. She thought about the Kethver ships still patrolling the border worlds. She thought about the next war that would inevitably come. The Academy might not want her war stories, but her students needed them. They needed to know that space was dangerous, that enemies were real, and that preparation could mean the difference between life and death. Maria had fought enemies abroad and lived to tell about it. Now she would fight a different kind of enemy to make sure her knowledge survived. She was not damaged. She was experienced. And experience was exactly what these peacetime warriors needed most. 3 months passed since Maria started teaching at the Academy. Each day brought new problems. Colonel Morrison found new ways to make her life difficult. He moved her classes to the worst time slots when students were tired. He gave her the oldest teaching equipment that barely worked. He assigned her extra paperwork that kept her busy long after other instructors went home. Maria tried to ignore the harassment. She focused on her students and did her job. But Morrison was not finished with her yet. On a cold Monday morning, Maria found a memo in her mailbox. The academy was making budget cuts. Several instructors would be reassigned to different duties. Maria's name was at the top of the list. She read the memo twice before the words sank in. Morrison was taking away her advanced tactics courses. Instead, she would teach basic navigation to first-year cadets only. It was a clear demotion, punishment for not playing by his rules. Maria knocked on Morrison's office door. He looked up from his desk with that same fake smile. "Ah, Captain Rodriguez, I suppose you received the memo about your new assignment." "Sir, I need to understand why I'm being removed from advanced courses. My student evaluations are excellent." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Budget cuts require efficiency, Captain. We need to streamline our operations. Basic navigation is better suited to your particular skills." Maria felt anger rising in her chest. "My particular skills include 5 years of combat command and tactical innovation that saved thousands of lives." "That's exactly the problem," Morrison said, his smile disappearing. "This is a military academy, not a war zone. We're training officers for peacetime service, not filling their heads with violence and paranoia." "Peacetime service?" Maria stepped forward. "Sir, the HFY are still active along the border. Intelligence reports show increased ship movements near the outer colonies." "Intelligence reports can be misinterpreted." Morrison waved his hand dismissively. "We need to focus on the future, not live in the past. Your new assignment starts next week." Maria left the office with her hands shaking. She walked through the halls and felt eyes watching her. Word traveled fast in the academy. Everyone knew about her demotion. Some instructors looked at her with pity. Others seemed pleased that the famous war hero had been brought down. The harassment got worse after that. Maria arrived at her office one morning to find crude words spray-painted on her door. Someone had covered her commendations with ugly graffiti that called her terrible names. The custodial staff cleaned it up, but Maria could still see faint traces of the paint. Her personal vehicle was parked in the academy lot. Twice she found all 4 tires slashed. Security cameras in that area seemed to always malfunction when she needed them. Maria started taking public transport, but that made her feel more vulnerable. Anonymous messages began appearing in her mailbox. Typed notes with no signatures. They called her a killer and a war criminal. One message suggested she should eat her service weapon like other broken soldiers. Maria kept the notes as evidence, but she also started checking her locks twice before going to bed. The worst part was the isolation. Other veteran instructors avoided her, afraid that Morrison's anger would spread to them. The younger faculty members whispered behind her back. Maria ate lunch alone and worked late into the evening when the halls were empty. Her breaking point came during a monthly faculty meeting. All the instructors gathered in the main conference room to discuss curriculum changes. Morrison stood at the front with charts and graphs, talking about his vision for the academy's future. "We need to eliminate outdated courses that no longer serve our mission," Morrison announced. "Classes on alien combat psychology and zero-gravity tactics are relics of a darker time. We're preparing officers for a peaceful future, not training them to be warriors." Maria sat in the back row, listening to Morrison dismantle everything she believed in. Other instructors nodded along, either agreeing with him or too scared to object. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "we'll be reducing the emphasis on practical combat scenarios. Simulation training is more cost-effective and less traumatic for our students." Maria could not stay quiet anymore. She stood up, and the room fell silent. "Colonel Morrison, recent intelligence reports indicate renewed HFY activity near the border worlds. Eliminating combat training could leave our graduates unprepared for real threats. Morrison's face turned red. Captain Rodriguez, your expertise in violence is well documented. But we're preparing officers for a peaceful future, not feeding your paranoid fantasies about alien threats. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Paranoid fantasies. She had lost 37 crew members fighting those fantasies. She had scars on her body from Kethver plasma weapons. She had nightmares about friends who died in space battles. Sir, those threats are real. I've seen what the Kethvar can do. Our students need to be ready. What our students need, Morrison said, coldly, is to learn from instructors who can adapt to peacetime reality. Perhaps you should consider whether you're truly suited for academic life. Maria felt every eye in the room watching her. Her hands trembled with rage and humiliation. She wanted to tell Morrison exactly what she thought of his peacetime reality. She wanted to describe the sound of hull breaches and the smell of burning flesh. She wanted to make him understand that peace was a luxury bought with the blood of soldiers. Instead, she sat down without another word. The meeting continued as if nothing had happened. Morrison finished his presentation to polite applause. Other instructors filed out, carefully avoiding eye contact with Maria. That night, Maria sat alone in her apartment, staring at her service pistol. The weapon lay on her coffee table, black metal gleaming under the lamplight. It would be so easy. One quick decision, and all the pain would stop. She thought about her crew on the Guardian. They had trusted her with their lives. When plasma fire lit up the bridge and alien ships surrounded them, they had looked to her for answers. She had never let them down, even when the odds seemed impossible. But this was different. She could not fight enemies who hid behind regulations and budget reports. She could not outmaneuver people who used words as weapons. Her tactical skills meant nothing against bureaucratic warfare. Maria picked up the pistol. The weight felt familiar in her hand. She had carried this weapon through a dozen battles. It had saved her life more times than she could count. Now it offered a different kind of salvation. A knock at her door made Maria jump. She quickly put the weapon away and answered the door. Cadet Ryan Murphy stood in the hallway, looking worried. Ma'am, I heard about your reassignment. Some of the other students are upset about it too. Your classes are the only ones that teach us real skills. Maria looked at the young man's concerned face. Behind him stood two other cadets, Alice Johnson and Kevin Martinez. They had all been in her advanced tactics course before Morrison shut it down. We started a study group, Alice said. We're going over the materials from your class on our own time. Could you maybe help us understand some of the more complex scenarios? Maria felt something break inside her chest. Not break like shattering, but break like dawn breaking through darkness. These students still believed in what she taught. They understood that her knowledge had value. Of course, Maria said. Come in. Let's talk about real space combat. The three cadets spent 2 hours in Maria's apartment, asking questions about tactics and ship handling. They took careful notes and asked for reading recommendations. When they finally left, Maria felt something she had not experienced in months. She looked at the drawer where she kept her pistol. The weapon would stay there, unused. She had remembered something important tonight. Giving up would not just destroy her. It would rob these students of knowledge they needed to survive. It would let Morrison win completely. Maria had fought alien enemies across the galaxy. Now she was fighting a different kind of war against bullies who wore the same uniform she did. This fight would require different tactics, but she was still a soldier. She would find a way to win. Maria decided to fight back, but she would do it smart. She had learned from her mistakes in the faculty meeting. Anger alone would not defeat Morrison. She needed evidence, allies, and a plan. She started keeping detailed records of everything. Morrison did to her. Every email, every meeting, every reassignment went into a secure digital file. Maria photographed the vandalism on her door before maintenance cleaned it up. She saved the anonymous threatening notes. She documented the tire-slashing incidents with dates and times. Her military intelligence training served her well. She knew how to gather information without being obvious about it. Maria began watching Morrison's patterns, learning his schedule, and identifying his supporters and enemies within the faculty. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kate Williams taught alien studies at the academy. She was a civilian scientist, not a military officer. Maria had seen her around the campus, but never spoken to her directly. Kate approached Maria after another faculty meeting, where Morrison had dismissed concerns about border security. She was a small woman with curly brown hair and intelligent, eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Captain Rodriguez, could I speak with you privately?" Kate asked. They walked to a quiet corner of the academy cafeteria. Kate looked around nervously before speaking. "I've been watching what Morrison is doing to you. I want you to know that you're not alone." Maria studied the civilian scientist. "What do you mean?" "Morrison has been targeting me too. My research into Kethver society and their military capabilities doesn't fit his peaceful future narrative. He's tried to cut my funding and reduce my class hours." Kate pulled out a tablet and showed Maria several documents. Research reports about Kethver ship movements, intercepted communications, and intelligence analysis that painted a very different picture from Morrison's optimistic assessments. "The war isn't over," Kate said quietly. "The Kethver are regrouping, rebuilding their fleets, and testing our defenses. My contacts in the intelligence community confirm it. But Morrison buries every report that contradicts his vision." Maria looked at the data. It matched what she had suspected based on her own combat experience. The Kethver were not a species that gave up easily. They would be back, probably stronger than before. "Why are you telling me this?" Maria asked. "Because you're the only instructor here who understands what we're really facing. Your combat experience is exactly what the Academy needs, but Morrison sees it as a threat to his authority." Over the following weeks, Maria and Kate began working together. They met quietly at off-campus coffee shops and shared information. Kate had been documenting Morrison's interference with her research for months. Her evidence complemented Maria's records perfectly. They identified other faculty members who had been targeted by Morrison. Lieutenant Commander Jake Parker taught spacecraft engineering. He had served on border patrol ships during the war and understood the practical challenges of deep space operations. Morrison had rejected all of his suggestions for upgrading the Academy's training facilities. Jake was a quiet man with calloused hands and a slow smile. He joined their informal group after Morrison publicly dismissed his proposal for more realistic engineering simulations. "The kids graduate thinking space travel is as easy as driving a car," Jake explained during one of their meetings. "They don't understand that one small mistake can kill everyone on board. Morrison says my approach is too negative, that we should focus on the positive aspects of space exploration." Major Helen Davis ran the Academy's logistics department. She was an efficient woman who had managed supply lines during the war. Morrison had blocked her recommendations for updating emergency protocols and stockpiling spare parts. "He wants everything to look perfect on paper," Helen said. "But when something goes wrong, those perfect reports won't save lives. We need redundancy, backup plans, and realistic preparation for crisis situations." The group met regularly to share information and coordinate their efforts. They discovered that Morrison had been systematically removing experienced officers from key positions and replacing them with younger personnel who had never seen combat. Maria began to understand Morrison's strategy. He was not just harassing. individual instructors. He was reshaping the entire academy to match his vision of a peaceful future where combat skills were unnecessary. It was a dangerous delusion that would leave humanity vulnerable to the next threat. The evidence against Morrison grew stronger, but Maria knew they needed more than documentation. They needed support from people with real authority. That meant reaching out to the Academy's board of directors and senior officials from Earth Command. Kate proved invaluable in this effort. Her civilian status allowed her to make contacts that military officers could not. She reached out to Admiral Susan Carter, who had served with Maria's former commander during the war. "Admiral Carter knows your reputation," Kate reported after. "Making contact. She's concerned about the direction the Academy is taking under Morrison's leadership." Meanwhile, Maria continued teaching her basic navigation classes. Word had spread among the student body that she was the real deal, an actual combat veteran with practical knowledge. Students began showing up to her classes in large numbers, far exceeding the official enrollment. Cadet Ryan Murphy organized study groups that met after regular classes. Students shared notes and discussed real-world applications of the material. Maria taught. Alice Johnson used her connections as a correspondent's daughter to gather more information about the war and its aftermath. "My mom covered the Battle of Kepler's Edge," Alice told Maria during one study session. "She has video footage of the fighting. Would you like to see it?" Maria hesitated. She had never watched recordings of her own battles. The memories were painful enough without visual reminders. But she realized the footage might be useful evidence. The video was hard to watch. Maria saw her ship, the Guardian, surrounded by Kethver vessels. She watched herself make the tactical decisions that saved 3 colony worlds but cost 37 lives. The footage clearly showed the innovative maneuvers that had become standard fleet doctrine. "This proves your methods work," Alice said. "Every ship in the fleet now uses the tactics you developed during this battle." Maria nodded, but her throat felt tight. She could see the faces of crew members who had died implementing her orders. Their sacrifice had meaning, but it still hurt to remember. The student support gave Maria strength to continue fighting. She began working with Jake and Helen to develop a comprehensive reform proposal for the Academy. They outlined specific changes needed to properly prepare students for real-world challenges. Kate provided intelligence briefings that supported their arguments. The Kethver threat was real and growing. Border colonies reported increased alien activity. Merchant ships had gone missing in contested sectors. The peace Morrison celebrated was fragile at best. Admiral Carter agreed to meet with their group. Privately, she listened to their evidence and reviewed their documentation. Her expression grew more serious as she understood the scope of Morrison's mismanagement. "This is worse than I thought," Admiral Carter said after reading their report. "Morrison is not just harassing individual instructors. He's systematically weakening our military education system." The Admiral promised to investigate their claims and bring the matter to the attention of the Academy's board of directors. Maria felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in months, but Morrison was not finished. He had noticed the growing student interest in Maria's classes and the quiet meetings between certain faculty members. His next move would be his most dangerous, yet Maria prepared for the final confrontation. She had allies now, evidence of wrongdoing, and support from students who understood what was at stake. The battle for the Academy's future was about to begin in earnest. She thought about her crew on the Guardian and the lessons they had learned together. Victory required preparation, courage, and the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. Maria had all 3, and she was ready to use them. The Academy's annual review board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday in late spring. Senior officials from Earth Command would evaluate the institution's performance and approve future policies. Morrison had spent weeks preparing his presentation. confident that his reforms would be praised. Maria and her allies had been preparing too, but Morrison did not know about their plans. Admiral Carter had quietly arranged for sympathetic board members to attend the meeting. The confrontation Maria had been building toward was finally at hand. The main conference room filled with board members, senior officers, and academy faculty. Morrison stood at the front, looking confident in his pressed uniform. His presentation materials were arranged perfectly on the table. "Distinguished members of the board," Morrison began, "I'm pleased to report on the Academy's successful modernization efforts over the past year." He clicked through slides showing budget savings, streamlined curricula, and efficiency improvements. Everything looked impressive on paper. Morrison had eliminated what he called outdated combat courses and reduced the number of veteran instructors. "We've moved beyond the trauma-based teaching methods of the past," Morrison continued. "Our new approach focuses on positive leadership skills and peaceful conflict resolution. We're preparing officers for a bright future, not dwelling on the darkness of war." Several board members nodded approvingly. Morrison's presentation was polished and professional. He made the changes sound reasonable and forward-thinking. Then Admiral Carter stood up. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Her uniform displayed ribbons from 3 different conflicts, including the recent war against the Kethfer. "Colonel Morrison, your efficiency improvements are noted, but I have concerns about eliminating practical combat training. Can you explain how removing experienced instructors improves our readiness for potential future conflicts?" Morrison's confident smile flickered slightly. "Admiral Carter, with respect, we must focus on current realities rather than hypothetical future wars. The Kethver conflict is over. We won decisively, did we?" Admiral Carter asked. "I have intelligence. Our EPORTS suggesting otherwise." Morrison's face grew red. "Admiral, I believe there may be some confusion about the current threat assessment. Perhaps Captain Rodriguez could clarify the situation," Admiral Carter said, looking directly at Maria. "She has recent combat experience that might be relevant." Maria stood up slowly. Every eye in the room focused on her. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She thought about her crew on the Guardian, about the students who needed proper training, about the future officers who would face real dangers in space. "Thank you, Admiral Carter," Maria said, her voice steady and clear. "I'd like to address several issues with the Colonel's presentation." Maria moved to the front of the room. She had her own materials prepared, carefully organized evidence that told a very different story from Morrison's glossy slides. "Colonel Morrison claims the Academy is more efficient now, but efficiency without effectiveness is meaningless. Let me show you what we've actually lost." Maria's first slide showed the courses that had been eliminated: combat psychology, zero-gravity tactics, emergency navigation, and alien warfare analysis. All practical skills that could save lives in real situations. "These aren't outdated subjects," Maria explained. "They're based on lessons learned through actual combat experience. Eliminating them leaves our graduates unprepared for the realities of space service." Morrison interrupted. "Captain Rodriguez, those courses focused on violence and fear. We're training peacekeepers, not warriors. Space is inherently dangerous," Maria replied calmly. "Equipment fails, emergencies happen, and yes, conflicts still occur. Our officers need to be prepared for all possibilities." She clicked to her next slide, showing footage from the Battle of Kepler's Edge. The room fell silent as they watched Maria's ship surrounded by alien vessels, plasma fire lighting up the darkness of space. "This battle took place 3 years ago," Maria narrated. "The tactical maneuvers you're seeing are now standard fleet doctrine. They were developed through practical experience, not theoretical study. The footage showed Maria's innovative use of gravity wells to trap enemy ships. Board members leaned forward, watching the complex maneuvers that had saved 3 colony worlds. 37 of my crew members died implementing these tactics, Maria continued, her voice never wavering. Their sacrifice had meaning because it protected human colonies and advanced our understanding of space combat. She paused the video on an image of the Guardian after the battle, hull scarred but victorious. Colonel Morrison calls this trauma-based teaching. I call it learning. From experience. The question is whether we want our future officers to benefit from hard-won knowledge or repeat deadly mistakes. Admiral Carter nodded approvingly. Other board members looked troubled by the gap between Morrison's presentation and Maria's evidence. Doctor. Kate Williams stood up next. If I may, I'd like to address the threat assessment issue. Kate presented her intelligence data showing increased Kethfer activity along the border. Ship movements, intercepted communications, and analysis that painted a clear picture of renewed alien military preparation. The war may have ended with a ceasefire, Kate explained, but the Kethfar have not abandoned their territorial ambitions. Intelligence suggests they're rebuilding their fleets and testing our defenses. Morrison tried to interrupt, but Admiral Carter silenced him with a look. Jake Parker spoke about the practical engineering challenges that students needed to understand. Helen Davis explained the logistics failures that could cripple military operations. Each ally Maria had gathered contributed evidence of Morrison's dangerous short-sightedness. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Cadet Alice Johnson stood up in the back of the room. Ma'am, may I speak on behalf of the student body? Admiral Carter nodded permission. We've created a petition signed by over 200 cadets, Alice said, holding up a thick folder. We're asking for Captain Rodriguez to be restored to teaching advanced courses. Her practical knowledge has transformed our understanding of space operations. Alice opened the folder and read testimonials from students. They described how Maria's real-world examples made complex concepts clear. They talked about learning skills that could save their lives in actual service. Captain Rodriguez doesn't just teach us facts, Alice concluded. She teaches us to think like officers who might face real dangers. That's what we need to serve humanity properly. The room was quiet when Alice finished. Morrison looked pale and defeated. His perfect presentation had been thoroughly demolished by facts, evidence, and student testimony. Admiral Carter stood up. Thank you all for this enlightening discussion. The board will now deliberate. The deliberation lasted only 30 minutes. When the officials returned, Admiral Carter delivered their verdict with military precision. The board finds serious deficiencies in the Academy's current leadership and educational policies. Colonel Morrison, you are hereby reassigned to logistics. Oversight at Luna Station 3. Captain Rodriguez, you are promoted to Associate Dean of Combat Studies with full authority to redesign the tactical curriculum. Morrison's face went white. Admiral, I protest this decision. My reforms have improved Academy efficiency. Your reforms have weakened our military preparedness, Admiral Carter replied coldly. This institution exists to train officers who can protect humanity, not to create bureaucrats who look good on paper. Security escorted Morrison from the room. Maria watched him go without satisfaction. She felt no joy in his defeat, only relief that the students would finally receive proper training. 2 weeks later, Maria stood before a packed auditorium of cadets, beginning her first lecture as Associate Dean. She looked out at hundreds of eager faces and felt the weight of responsibility. Today we begin with the most important lesson I can teach you, Maria told her students. Victory isn't just about defeating external enemies. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought against the forces that would make us weaker, whether they come from space or from within our own institutions. The cadets leaned forward, hanging on every word. Maria smiled, finally understanding her. True purpose. Your job as future officers is to recognize both kinds of threats and have the courage to stand against them. You will face dangers in space, but you must also be prepared to fight for what's right here at home. Maria began her lesson, teaching students who understood they were learning from someone who had fought both kinds of battles and won. She had found her place in this new world, and her greatest victories still lay ahead in the minds she would shape and the leaders she would inspire.